open studios. And I definitely don't want to miss any of the guests that you're going to hear from. So joining us first this morning is David Mandel. David was actually one of those middle school students, and he has agreed to share his reflections on that as a student, but also as a professional, because like Naomi, David went on and to become an educator and a principal, and now leads across the country in helping teachers develop their capacity to think and to help their students think. So David, talk to us, just tell us a little bit, but we always like to hear and appreciate you being willing to share some of those middle school stories and ideas, but how has that impacted you as a person and as a professional?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me, Sherry. I think looking back on middle school, it was middle school. I don't know that any of us knew what was happening, like that this was part of the curriculum or a project. I actually found out about it when I was invited back when I was an adult I was a teacher at the time and invited back for a panel as part of this follow-up for the project, and realized that something different was happening in middle school compared to the typical experience. So looking back, I can reflect on the prominence of like seeking patterns. That was a cross-disciplinary way of thinking and a drive throughout the school. Also, there was an openness to thought. I think at the time too, standards were just coming into being. There was more flexibility within a curriculum, but we did simulations and we did in science classes, and that I think that was pretty early in terms of the role of simulations in a classroom. But we got to engage in that. We got to engage in reading and writing that I think was a bit different than the typical experience looking back. Again, seeking patterns and looking for meaning beyond just plot, looking for connections to our own lives and other relevant contexts. So, I think the early invocation of systems and systems thinking resonated. It definitely sunk in with me, and I would probably only be able to name it again as an adult. So it wasn't about making it a thing. It really was an undercurrent. I think well planned and executed, and it wasn't by accident, but it was an undercurrent that really served as a foundation throughout the middle school experience.
Super. And so what are your beliefs about how to best help people build these capacities? How do you do it today?
I think if you think about cognition and neuroscience that we know today, the human brain is really attuned to patterns. And from early age, almost consciousness, right? We're looking for patterns. And I think giving room for that is the essential piece. That the human experience is naturally robust for everyone. Everyone has this ability and also context to apply. And so asking questions and giving room and space and time to seek those patterns, ability to be wrong, because sometimes you may feel like you've seen a trend or something and you need to back away from it. That's okay too. And giving space for that, I think is the key. I always hesitate to name something initially and be like, oh, well, we're using successive approximation here. It's not about that. It's sometimes more about just opening up the possibility of thought, the room for thought, and then knowing that from a systems thinking perspective, we're steering conversation in that way. I think that's oftentimes the most powerful. I have the opportunity right now to work with school leaders across the country, and I think what they've told me they appreciate most is that when we talk and I'm able to pose a question, and then we can linger in it. We can sit in it for 5 or 10 minutes and really dialogue about it.
Hmm.
That's what they see as the most useful part of our time together, which I think is unique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I am hearing, if I'm correct in there, that there is it's about the process of application, and that, again, one of our things that it develops over time. It can look different at different stages. It can look different for different people. And that there's a degree of flexibility that's required and time. Those of you that know our habits and they're coming later, hopefully you're making some connections to those. But Tracy talked about Jim and successive approximation. David talked about patterns, generates patterns and trends. But then I also hear that some of the work that you're doing now, people just most value that space, considering an issue fully and resisting the urge to come to a quick conclusion. And I think that's one of the reasons that Open Studio is popular, because it gives us an hour a month to just sort of think a little bit more about some of those ideas. All right. Well, if you have questions for David, again, make a note of those, stick in chat, but we're going to come back. I'm going to introduce you to Sandro here for just a minute, and then we'll come back and ask both of them some questions about, how does this developmental trajectory of systems thinking work? So now, without further ado, and I have to say, again, this is the power of this community. I met Sandro one day. He made a comment in chat and I private messaged him, and I think we have met about every 4 to 6 weeks since then, approaching a year now. And so it is a pleasure, and he was gracious enough. He is doing some very interesting work with systems thinking and development and has a perspective. And one day he just shared with me, and I saw the development of systems thinking, and he was so specific in how he saw this individual progress on their systems thinking learning trajectory that I was like, oh, would you join us and would you talk about that? So Sandra's going to take a few minutes to share about some of the work that he's doing and then share some of those insights. And then again, along with David, both of them are open to fielding some questions from all of you. So keep those questions in mind. Sandra, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you to everybody who's attending this very interesting seminar, Open Studio. As Sherry said, it has been a wonderful opportunity for me to have her, in a sense, like my mentor in this trajectory of seeing a little bit more clearly what I was doing. And I've been doing things that seem to go under the rubric of system thinking for a number of years in development aid work, which is not the central topic of my life, but has become such a central element. I'm actually a statistician, but over the last 30, 35 years, I've been involved in community-based development programs, small, unambitious projects that my wife and I have set up under the request of local communities in India and in Nepal, and sometimes in Switzerland and in Italy, where we live most of the time. So we spend several months a year in India and in Nepal. And I sort of intuitively have come over many years to a formal understanding of what we've been doing. And perhaps, if Sherry, if you agree, I may show just a few slides to go directly into our practical application of system thinking with communities. I think that David and other people on the panel can probably speak much better about the theory and the framework, the whole ideology of system thinking. I don't feel fit for that, but what I can perhaps share is a little bit of insight into elements that have to do with our work. So I'd like to see if I can share, what is it?
It should be no problem.
Let's see, share screen. Just a different layout. Let's see. Can you see the presentation?
We can, perfect.
So very, very quickly, communities are not captive in the sense that quite often when we think about application of system thinking, we think about, again, schools or organizations that ask for input on that kind of framework. Communities somehow are not captive in the sense that they don't belong to an organization, they don't constitute a class or of a school. They're just a very organic combination of individuals. And these individuals may not feel that they have and they share a common goal, as it is the case perhaps for employees within a company. And these are two elements that for us represent a very interesting difference from other settings in which system thinking is applied. And some other element that I want to share with you very quickly, but I hope that in a way that contributes to sort of critically looking at the application of system thinking in development work. In terms of our organization, which is a microscopic NGO, feel that are organic with them, that is them being the community. And that's a sort of reciprocal idea. They should feel organic with us. And we work together as a community. We feel that the work that we do applying system thinking, and we will see in a moment how it happens, it actually constitutes a common journey. And continuity of relation, it's fundamental. And that continuity has to start in the same way in which it has to develop, and the same way in which whatever work that we do with the communities is intended to happen. So there must be coherence since the beginning with what system thinking elements are all about. And we have a role to play, so we don't feel like facilitators. Facilitators bringing system thinking as a tool. We actually are embedded in that community. And like any other member or segment of that community, we have a role to play. And our role is to bring to the surface a number of synergies that are latent and hopefully co-create recombinations of elements which are present in the community but not necessarily seen, and try to make participation become a real need and not a choice or an exhortation, which is often the way in which participation is treated by NGOs or INGOs working in development aid. Participation is actually something that is ignited by the fact that we connect. And these last three elements are the things that actually represent the aim of our work. Sometimes we have a feeling that as facilitators, we should not bring a focus or suggest an area on which to work. Well, actually we do, but at a higher conceptual level. And so that's the aim that we have, really co-create a space to reveal synergies. One element that we find absolutely vital, and I think David was saying something very similar to that a moment ago, is deep listening and deep seeing. That is looking at the problems from the perspective of other people or other segment of the community. And that's a phenomenon which has to be considered as reciprocal. So we are not there to listen to them. Everybody is there to listen to each other and to see from or through the eyes of each other, with an intentional purpose and with a very considerate purpose. That is, that there is a reason why we have to listen to each other, because we have to co-create together. And I would like just to suggest that perhaps on your own time, look at the difference between being considerate and being compassionate. Compassionate is often something that we cite as an element of relationship, but there is more to that. Compassionate attitudes may not necessarily encompass the variety of relations that we are trying to ignite through system thinking. So just a little note, but look at the etymology of these two words. They look similar, but actually they convey completely different meanings. And we're trying more to be considered than compassionate. The other thing that we try to do always is to integrate pressing needs. And often pressing needs are treated as exceptions that can be addressed outside a system thinking approach. Well, communities often have pressing needs. They don't have water. They don't have access to healthcare. The temptation could be to address these pressing needs in ways that immediately provide results. And that would be, in a sense, contradictory with the purpose of system thinking approaches and applications. And therefore, we try to, coherently with system thinking, and therefore in a recursive approach, avoid shortcuts and build into whatever we do also the integration of pressing needs. So although we may have a longer term horizon, nonetheless, when working with communities, we have to face also pressing needs. The other thing is that we're not shy about saying that we do bring something to communities, although we don't, in the sense that we don't bring money, we don't bring materials, we don't bring solutions, we bring joy and care. We bring commitment to facilitate the process. We contribute with material, with examples, with synthesis, with suggestions, and that's our role. And we try to connect local and distant partners. That's what we bring. And again, often the tendency may be in development work, when you try to do it in a sort of alternative way, to sort of shy away from bringing things. And these are physical things, but there are still other physical things which don't often belong to the development aid package, which you can bring without modifying and altering the local equilibrium. So we do bring something. The other thing that we have to consider is that we have to go beyond modeling and predicting, which is something that system thinking can do very, very well. But there is, and I think that, again, David hinted at that, there is another element, which is the one of creativity, which has to be allowed for, and often enriching the picture with things that are not usually part of it may bring to the surface opportunities which otherwise are not that visible. The other thing that we face frequently is the fact that people find it very difficult to imagine, very difficult to suppose, very difficult to make hypotheses. And that's something which is central to system thinking in order to reassemble, to find leverage points and things like that. And we have to consider that. And we don't always know how to develop approaches that allow for these difficulty that people have. And when you work with a system thinking approach, imagination plays an immense role. And suggesting to people that they could think differently from how they usually do is just not enough. And we have to find ways. And that's a very big open area, open field on which we work every day and then try every day. And another one is considering the fact that people are not used to envisage a desired future. They are used to identify problems and identify conventional solutions. How to break that barrier? Well, through anticipation, to asking questions, and then lots of other things which I've listed here. But again, that's something, a learning effort that we make every day. And additionally, I wanted to show you just a few ideas of what we feel are relevant measures of progress when we try to apply system thinking with communities. It's to look beyond, and I think that Sherry mentioned that a moment ago, look beyond the idea of one problem, one solution, which is, again, very conventional approach of most organizations when they build a school because they have to contribute to education. Well, that doesn't fix the problem at all. The other one is to see, when you see that people are less fretting to shift into doing something, which is often what they tell you. And when they begin to wait, to think, to go deeper into issues without feeling that we're not only talking, we're not only having meetings. Very often in Nepal, people used to tell us meetings. When you have that feedback from people that only feel that we are meeting with them and discussing, then there is a signal that things are not really going as they should. So when people try to or manage to find a meaning into the discussions, then that's perhaps a measure of how of the fact that we're making progress into system thinking approaches. when they reproduce the process that we do all together in smaller groups within their own organization, within their own support group, within their own financial support group or microfinancing group, that's another signal that things are happening and they're moving. When they begin, or we all together begin to test possibilities, initiatives with the purpose to learn, and therefore with the idea of having feedback. And also when we see multiple purposes of the same action. So perhaps playing football is not just to have a leisure time, but it's also to connect with other people, inviting friends, having the opportunity to discuss issues that otherwise would not be discussed. So that's the way in which we try to include and address our work through the lens of system thinking. And again, I just wanted to give you an idea of the way in which we work. And I will stop here, and I will accept as many questions as you have.
Oh, thank you, Sandro. So I mean, it feels like having a favorite child to have a favorite habit, but I kind of do, and that makes meaningful connections. And my mind is kind of reeling at all the connections between really, even though Naomi wasn't here, but Naomi's stories, David's stories, and Sandro's stories about how to really, when you said helping people go deeper without feeling like it's just talking. David saying that opportunity for dialogue was most important. Naomi would reiterate that it was the time that, she grew up in an era where children played and explored, and it was the time to cultivate and to flame this fire rather than to put it out. That was really powerful for her. So, and then I also have to say, Sandra, and maybe you could, I love that first thing on your first slide about communities are not captive. And that really made me think about systems boundaries and what a skill that is too, when we think about, and then it feeds into the not one problem, not one solution, because what those communities have a very integrated approach to community life. That's very different than the school or the healthcare system or the government. It is all those factors. And so as systems thinkers, we want to be mindful of boundaries, but we also need to know when to expand and connect those boundaries in order to really solve problems.
Yes, absolutely. I think that when we work with communities, it's very difficult to restrict the attention to one specific domain. When we talk with the schools, and then we talk to the parents, and then we talk to the members of the school management committee, they all have the school in common, but they all have their own lives. They all have their own issues that make them come to school perhaps late, or not being able to do the homework with the kids because of health issues, because of work issues. They cannot leave the children at school because they don't have the time to come and pick them up. And everything is connected. So when you talk to one element or one individual or one segment of the population, you have to remember all the others. And indeed, it's an issue of where to set the boundaries. And in community work, the boundaries actually overlap, or the pieces of the system overlap. And so that for us, it's always a huge difficulty. And I'm not sure we have solutions. We learn every day. And what is important, I think, is to always keep in mind the local context. No two situations, no two communities, no two segments of the populations are similar.
So I'm going to add David Spotlight. If you have questions, put them in chat. But on that note, Sandra, I'll just say, how has to either of you, how is your attention to systems thinking? How does that impact your ability to really work within a context and to appreciate that problem solving is unique to time and place and people? Or maybe you can even help us with an example of how do you use systems in that regard, really applying it to a context.
David, maybe you want to take it.
Sure. For everyone, I apologize. There's some landscaping happening outside of our house today that was not planned, so if it's loud. I think there was something kind of an overarching, and I think you articulated it, Sandro, kind of an inherent belief that people have the capacity to develop themselves and to come to their own solutions. And sometimes it's about a collaborator, a co-creator, helping them arrive at that at that action, right? That it's that action that is so meaningful. So I think like exploring the context and giving yourself time to understand the context that you're working in, and then asking questions kind of unabashedly, and maybe some questions that address what might be like sacred cows. So sometimes when I'm working with people, I will just say, like, is there anything sacred that you're not telling me? Like, is there anything in the background that that we should surface to talk about? And that's kind of an uncomfortable question when you think about, especially facilitating change, or a change in organization, or a change in thinking. But kind of diving into it and giving space for that, I think adds to that idea of context. That every context has its third rail, right? It's sacred cow, it's thing that we don't touch, and or thing that we believe, or something kind of central that is lingering out there, that if we don't take time to talk about and to explore, then we're really, around the outside of the system rather than starting to get to the interior. And so I think systems thinking and my practice experience learning around it kind of grounds me in the idea that it's okay to ask that question. It's okay to try and understand what is at the core, rather than just think about the external kind of visible process. So I think we're kind of talking about the idea of mental models, and that getting at those mental models and helping people articulate them, helping frame them, thinking about like that desired state, that hypothetical state, is really addressing what are mental models, and what do we want them to be? Where are we now? Are they changeable? Because some may not be. And so I think it's essential.
Yeah, of course, I would totally agree with what you said, David. For our work, I think contextualizing really means what the word says. That is, never giving anything for granted, exploring, asking a lot of questions, and trying to address the multiplicity of the answers that we could give to these questions with the people themselves. So again, as facilitators, I think we may have a tendency to focus on a pathway that we feel that we have to lead. Well, we definitely have to anticipate, but we also have to knit and let other people knit with us. And I think that's the essence, at least for us, of contextualization. When we worked, for instance, after the earthquake in Nepal, which happened in 2015 with an enormous destruction. I mean, imagine 750,000 homes destroyed in a few minutes, and having to rebuild all that. Well, I mean, we started by trying to understand what were the building requirements, and we discovered something that many organizations working in reconstruction have never even suspected and considered. That is, that the building code was not compulsory in the rural areas. That meant everything and anything. And the other thing was that the building code, not compulsory, was based on empirical evidence, which is a wonderful concept, and that allows people to rebuild using their traditional approaches. Well, that meant for us contextualizing. That is, one opportunity could have been, like other organizations have done, to think that we knew what were the technical features of an earthquake-resistant building, and try to build according to that concept. Well, we just put the foot on the brake, discussed with the local people, studied their own buildings, comparing that with the building code, talking to the local universities. We were the only unofficial, by the way, organization, because we've never been registered as official organization working in Nepal. the only one, having established a memorandum of understanding with the local university and the architectural department, we felt that it was absolutely necessary for people to connect with their own technical skills. And so we brought students to the community, and they talked, they discussed, and the students had lots of ideas, and they wanted to do their own things. And with the locals, and the locals were interested in understanding what they knew about building technology. And that was another way of contextualizing, that is, of trying to put together empirical evidence, experience from the ground. Many of these students, unfortunately, did not live in rural areas. They lived in urban areas. So that contrast allowed a wonderful discussion and bringing to the surface lots of elements. That's the way in which we try to contextualize. And again, it's extremely difficult. It's a very complicated journey, but don't assume that you can do it on your own. Don't assume that you have to do it for someone else. Try to find ways to approach contextualization with the people you work with.
So Sandra, on that line, you had a question come in chat, and you spoke to it a little bit even after it came, but Kelly asks, could you speak a bit to the impact of doing this work cross-culturally, especially the differences between applying systems thinking within a more individualistic versus a more collectivistic culture?
Extremely difficult question. And I think that it would be more interesting to debate it than having me answering it. It's very, very difficult to maintain a balance. We come, and everybody does, so we should not be shy about it. But when we go to distant countries, we come with our baggage of culture, history, the way in which people look at us. We generate expectations, and the issue is to be aware of it. And I think that's also part of system thinking. That's another piece of the puzzle to put into the picture. Be aware of it. And again, through interactive, reciprocal, which is again another piece of system thinking, interaction with the local people, we try to build trust. Something that we do for many, many weeks, if not months, is just to drink tea with people. It's simple as that. And that's one way of putting aside our preconceptions, but also the preconceptions of the people that we work with. Everybody comes with his own or her own luggage of preconception. And changing the mindset, our mindset, the community's mindset, is one of the most difficult things that we can do. And so we are aware of that immense problem. We don't have ready-made solutions. We come with the idea that collective approaches may bank on synergies and generate desired futures, perhaps more efficiently and in a more satisfactory way, in a more organic way than individualistic approaches. But the individualistic trend is extremely strong, even in faraway countries from the Western world. And that aspiration makes things extremely difficult. But it happens. Again, if I bring an example, if I may, from our work in Nepal, we gathered people from the community. They were all expecting us to bring masons, to bring material, to give money. And of course, it was not our approach. And over 2 days, people from the community, given the trust that we had built, despite cultural differences, came to a seminar, which was not run as an official one, but as a moment of common work. And for 2 days, they instinctively decided to shut off their phones, not to go out for smoking a cigarette, not to return home for dinner or for lunch. And everybody remained there. How did we create that tension, that collective thinking and collective need? I don't know. But I think that one element is mutual listening. People knew that we were listening to them. They knew that they could listen to each other. And we discovered that they didn't have to to send their relatives abroad, to send remittances for them to rebuild. They didn't have to buy highly technical material to rebuild. They could use local materials. So they discovered things that they did not consider possible. How did that happen? I'm not sure I can tell you, but it required definitely a lot of mutual trust, a lot of knitting relationships, or building possibilities, and it happened.
Thank you. So I'm going to take just a minute, although I seem to have lost it, to share my screen. We did talk a little bit. I put in chat one of my favorite books, 3 Cups of Tea, which Sandra made me think about that whole idea about, this radical listening, really listening to people in different ways. I have it my actual slideshow is gone. Give me just a second. Like these awkward transitions. There we go. There it is. Why won't you share it? So what I want to say is, if Gordon started the campfire with bringing this to schools, then I think what David and Sandra have shared, and this was a really smooth transition a minute ago, is they have moved it from a fire to an eternal flame. Because when they talk about this radical listening, and I don't like to throw around this sacred space term lightly, but I think what Sandra just described, when those people committed to staying in that community despite their personal comforts and needs, that's when listening becomes the sacred space. And we would say at the Water Center that this whole idea of like, how do you make systems thinking embedded? It has to be something that you do. It's not a framework or a construct or a philosophy. It really is action. And we have tried to put systems thinking to action through these habits, and to do our little part to make that an eternal flame in the way people work and communicate and solve problems. And we could spend a whole nother hour making connections. I have been replete with them as we have gone through this. But I also think that it's important, and we talk about, it's about igniting a fire and not extinguishing it. So not being locked into our individualistic mindsets, not refusing to engage in deep listening, even when it's hard. Like David talked to us about, okay, what are those sacred cows? And how are we going to get people to surface the mental models, values, beliefs, perceptions that really do matter in making change? I put in, I don't think we're gonna have time for that at all. I put in chat a PDF of one of our documents that, again, we really do want to think about this developing systems thinking capacity as a developmental process. And you have this entire rubric. I modified the area of application just a bit, but I would encourage you, and those of you who came with that promise of how do you grow it? How do you measure it? How do you know that it's happening? If it's not a checklist, if it's not a thing, as David so clearly said in the beginning, then you have to see it as a process. And you have to say, we all see ourselves somewhere on the journey, and different days in different areas of my work and professional life, I'm in different places on this rubric. Some days, what it means to listen deeply and really surface my own mental models, I'm locked in and I am just developing. And some days I can be internalizing and integrating what people are saying with regards to those mental models and those applications of my systems thinking capacity. Also, because we are running kind of close to the end of time, I want to put in another link from our website. And again, David and Joan, that school district that David was in and that Joan worked in, have developed a whole set of rubrics around K-12 competencies. Those are on our website. They have revised them. They have worked with other professional educators in a variety of areas, but to identify, how do you know that students are really able to grow in their understanding of circular feedback or in patterns and trends, the one that David highlighted us as so very important going forward. I just think those are two powerful. And then so I think those would be two powerful tools that we have, and we have several others, but that sort of help us know Sandro is a keen observer, and he shares, and I also thought those steps that you had on that final slide about how do you measure progress, again, it looks different than lots of evaluation, but those were really like, I'm gonna sneak back into the recording and steal those, because they really are clear kinds of tangible things that we can look for and think about. So we are at the end of I have a couple of announcements. If you have, again, always it's good, but the chat today, again, we could do a whole thing about your early experiences. We may have to go back and do that in some future open studio. And we got really close, I think, with Kelly's question and others to having this conversation. I don't want to end it, but it's my job to keep us on time. If you enjoyed this conversation, then we definitely want you to come back. Thank you, Martha. We will try to take questions here at the end for just a minute. We do want you to come back 1 month from today, the first Thursday in the month. Next time, we have one AFC graduate, David, I should say, is an AFC graduate of our Advanced Facilitator Credential Program, and 2 current candidates who all work for the Public Health Department in Dane County and who are applying systems thinking to public health. Now, if that's not your field, make sure you note in their description that they said, whatever your field, they guarantee you that you'll be able to make a connection, because we're all affected by the public health system. But again, it's this idea that systems thinking capacity is embedded. And one of you, there was another comment that I had wanted to make. It's this rich discussion is, I often say that it's the blessing and curse, you've heard me say this before, of systems thinking, how well it integrates into everything. It means it's powerful, it means it's essential, but I think it's harder for people to grasp how applicable it is because it is so integrated. And I think when we think about developing capacity, that's one of the things we really have to consider. One more opportunity, our colleague Danelle Hogan, who is Chief Learning Officer for us, who works very specifically and intensively with helping K-12 educators develop systems thinking capacity, particularly in the field of STEM, science, engineering, mathematics. She is current, or will be, in a couple of days, boarding the JOIDIS Resolution, a research ship in the North Atlantic, and she is going to be providing some broadcasts from the ship. So there's a link on the website. I will put that in chat here in just a moment. Note that on my slides, the times in blue are specifically for teachers, families, more general information, lots of opportunities for questions, I am sure. And the times in orange are specifically classroom engagement times. So if you know classrooms that might want to be part of these broadcasts and see STEM and systems thinking in action on this research vessel, please share those times. There's a abbreviated link that in the chat that you can access those times with. So yes, this was a fire hose day. And so David, thank you for responding in chat. So if you are not able to follow that conversation, Martha said, Sandra, David, how do you manage the emotional energy and tension in the group associated with the process of making mistakes and shifting into the emotional energy and inspiration associated with thought experiments? Well, there's a whole hour, Martha. Let's just have, I think we got our topics for a year, Joan, out of this open studio. And David says, great question. I think that as a collaboration in the discussion, it is essential to be clear that the thought experiments are part of the process. When people think they are actively planning in a linear model, they are more likely to feel demoralized. Yeah, wow.
Maybe I can just add a sentence or two about that. One way in which we try to do so is to have multiple things happening at the same time, so that there is no focus on a single activity to which everybody has to relate, but there may be different things nested with each other. And that's also a way to diversify the approach and reconnect when possible among different subgroups. So you must have, I think, a number of things happening. And that's what we try to do with the school, with the forest management committee, with the local nurses school. So we try to have different things happening at the same time within the same community.
Thank you, Martha. Thanks you. So you can tell I don't want it to end, but it is time. I would encourage you to just jot a note of personal takeaway. And I'm going to share mine as model. So because I have one from both of our presenters today, David, it's okay to ask the question. I mean, it is okay to ask the question. And then Sandra, from you, we bring something. We bring joy and care and the commitment to facilitate the process. So asking the good questions and being committed to the process will develop systems thinking capacity in any context, with any age group. And we just thank you for being part today. Hope to see you back in November. Take good care. And again, Sandro, David, thank you so much for your time. We
Thank you.
just
Thank you
appreciate it
everybody.
from the bottom of our hearts.
Have a good day. Thank you.